Hey, listeners, thanks for joining us today. I'm Deb Reuben, and here at TomorrowZone, we're always experimenting, trying new things, having fun with that. That's part of innovating. And in our continual pursuit of learning forward, we're changing it up today. We're going to host a little jam session on leveling up virtual meetings. And our host today is the lovely and talented producer of the TomorrowZone Catalyst Podcast, Alissa Bartlett. Alissa, take it away.
Welcome to the TomorrowZone Catalyst Podcast. I'm your host, Alissa Bartlett. Calendars are crammed, notifications never stop, and we're all being pulled in a dozen different directions at once. Virtual meetings should be more than just another box to check. They should be productive, energizing, and yes, even enjoyable. Today, we're digging into strategies to transform your virtual meetings from obligatory slogs into engaging, efficient experiences that respect everyone's time. Today, I'm joined by two of my colleagues at TomorrowZone. Jennica Burgh, Director of Operations at TomorrowZone, is a strategic North Star, a leader who blends operations expertise, empathy, and vision to unite teams and execute big ideas. Welcome, Jennica.
Thank you.
And you all know her and love her. Deb Reuben, CEO and founder of TomorrowZone, is a recognized trailblazer in blending emerging technology with human-centered innovation. She's spent more than 2 decades guiding leaders through transformation with clarity, curiosity, and bold strategy. Welcome, Deb.
Thanks, Alissa. I'm really looking forward to this. I think it's going to be fun.
Me too. So, first up, let's just get this stuff out of the way. Let's talk about our virtual meeting pet peeves. And I'll let you guys think about yours, and I can go first. So one of my virtual meeting pet peeves is camera angles and having like just the forehead or, just the under the chin and you can't really see the eyes. And, you got to pay attention to how you're showing up with your camera on a virtual meeting so that people can see you properly. Now I'll throw it over to the fence to you guys. Jennica, want to tell us about one of your virtual meeting pet peeves?
I would love to. Again, so many. Where do I start? But, you went visual. I'm going to go audio. I think for me, it's just people that don't liberally use their mute button and are, sighing or even having a conversation with someone off screen. If you're drinking a carbonated beverage, use the mute button, please. That for me is just making sure that you're aware that a lot of times anything that's going on out around you can be picked up. So mute yourself. Very easy.
I'm just kind of cracking up at Jennica's because so many funny things happen with sound. Getting dog bombed, getting robot bombed during meetings. There's this certain AI that shall not be named that usually thinks I'm talking about it. I actually had to turn that off if my phone was near. The one that really is a pet peeve for me is when folks are using their laptop and using the laptop as both speaker and microphone. And what that causes is this feedback that makes you all sound like we're in outer space. Somebody will say their comment, but instead of them saying their comment, it comes through as comment, 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 comment. And so the echo is just one of the big annoyances for me. You can combat that with like a simple, cheap set of headphones.
Yes, the ones that we are all wearing right now.
Well, my favorite actually are the old-fashioned Apple earbuds that, with the cord and everything, because it's reliable and it doesn't do funky stuff like those, like the AirPods, with the funky switching and running out of battery at just the wrong time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I try to keep it simple there when it comes to audio.
Yeah, keep it simple. Those are some great pet peeves to share, and hopefully people are starting to get a sense of the kind of advice we're going to be giving here. I'm curious for you to share a time when someone's virtual presence, positive or awkward, totally shifted the vibe of a meeting. What did you notice and what can we learn from it? Jennica, let's start with you.
I'm going to give an example of what I was talking about previously. We were running a workshop and there was somebody in the workshop who was just sighing constantly. It was interesting because it became very apparent later that that person was very engaged, but the vibe that it gave off was annoyed, bored, distracted, nothing positive. I mean, huge, heavy sighs usually don't have a positive vibe to them. And so that's where just, again, being aware of how you're showing up and using that mute button, it's very powerful. I mean, I often, as the host and the facilitator, will mute people if they're not recognizing it. But just being self-aware is super important. So that was probably one of the things that really jumped out for why that's so important.
The sighing Simon.
Yeah, it reminds me of that scene in Napoleon Dynamite.
Gosh.
Heavy breathing. Yeah.
I mean, the thing I've learned with audiences is you just can't assume what they're thinking.
Exactly.
I remember I was giving a keynote in person one time and I saw folks on their phone and I'm like, oh my gosh, they're just not paying attention. Am I missing it? And I kept going and everything. I found out after, they're like, oh my gosh, this was so awesome. I was texting my boss. You got to hear what Deb is talking about right now. So like, you can't assume just because they're sighing or whatnot. You never know what's going on the other side of the screen. So that's something that I keep in mind often. Like, don't take it personal. Mm-hmm. But it is important to be aware of how you're showing up. And this is one of the things for me is, our team is virtual. And so we're together like this quite often. And sometimes I know that I can probably totally change the vibe of a meeting when I show up completely hopped up on caffeine after getting a vitamin B shot. I mean, it's like I'm on rocket fuel.
That's my favorite version of Deb.
Everything is awesome. And like, I can't stop smiling. And it's just, turns into kind of fun. There may even be snort laughs. So,
it's the opposite of Debbie Downer.
Totally.
Every time Deb is like, I just got a vitamin B shot, I'm like, okay, I know what I'm in for.
Yeah. That's definitely the Be Happy vitamin for me.
Yeah.
Nice. So speaking of B vitamins and how their energizing properties, when you're leading or facilitating a virtual meeting, what's your go-to move to spark energy or real engagement? And again, I'm going to start with Jennica.
That's a great question. And I'm actually going to back it up before the meeting starts, because I think as leaders, the most important thing to be asking ourselves is, does this actually have to be a meeting? It can be so easy to feel like we need to fill schedules with meetings in order to be productive. At TomorrowZone, we work very hard to do a lot of work asynchronously. Deb has been great at championing this. One of the things I've started doing is if I have something that I need to convey, I'll actually record a solo Zoom meeting of myself, just talking about it, and then send it off and go, hey, I just want you to be aware of this. If you need to talk more about it, let me know, and then we can do a meeting. But just always starting with, what could I do to avoid another meeting on somebody's schedule? Because when you have that approach, then if there is a meeting, people take it seriously. They're like, oh, there must be a reason she's actually asking to take up, my time with us. And so I think that really just being intentional about the why behind the meeting, making sure that the people that are in the meeting actually do need to be there, is just being respectful of people's times. It's showing your team that you trust and respect them. And so to me, I realize that's kind of backing up the question, but to me, that's one of the biggest things I think we can do to make sure that our meetings are engaging when we're actually having them.
I think that's an excellent point, starting from before the meeting even happens. That's when you set the tone, whether or not you have a meeting. So that makes a lot of sense to me. And Deb, what do you think about this one?
Well, I mean, I want to double click a little bit on what Jennica was talking about, because we talk about the why behind the thing all the time at TomorrowZone. And, even with meetings, success begins before you start the meeting. And so I love that notion of let's just make sure this actually does need to be a meeting. And I don't think a lot of people think about it from the standpoint of a business owner like I do, but I understand the cost of every meeting that I do.
Right,
And
you have to be paying all those people to be there together.
Right. Yeah, and it's not just the combination of the salaries that are in the room. It's the opportunity cost of being in that meeting at the expense of not doing other things. Every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. On the flip side, when you say no to something like an unnecessary meeting, you're saying yes to more valuable activities. And, I just think that that's a little mindset shift that's important to embrace. And I'm really grateful that Jennica has embraced that and practices it all the time. When I think about my go-to move to spark energy and engagement in meetings, one of the things that I do is I don't assume that people will engage. When it comes to virtual meetings, it's not the same as when you're in person and people are leaning in and there's body language that you just naturally pick up on and you can tell when people want to engage. And so I watch people and I call on them. I don't assume understanding. I don't throw out a question and then there's crickets. I'll actually go around the virtual room and I'll call on people. Hey, I'd love to know what you're thinking about this. Hey, you bring a really valuable perspective to the table. Can you kind of share how you're thinking about what we have talked about? And, do you agree? Are you comfortable with this? Or would you go a different way? And let's hear it, And so you do have to engage people in a conversation. And, we don't need more presentations. You can get that on YouTube. When we're coming together like this, it's because we need to work something out. We need to collaborate. We're thought partners together. Maybe we're making a decision. Just think about back to purpose. Why are you bringing everybody together? And design the meeting experience accordingly.
And I want to flip this around a little bit now and think about, as a participant, what does it mean to show up well in a virtual room? And how do you bring presence even when you're not leading? I actually will kick this off and say the simple act of smiling and nodding encouragingly can go a long way. And another thing that I like to do when I'm in a virtual meeting is I go into focus mode with all my tech. I'm fortunate enough to have a Mac computer and an Apple phone. And so when I go into focus mode on my computer, it automatically puts my phone into focus mode and I don't get bothered by dings and pings and things. So I think those two things are really important to help you show up well in a virtual room.
Vigorous head nod, vigorous head nod, vigorous head nod.
Jennica, what do you think?
I love those. I think they're huge. And, what you're saying, what I'm hearing you say with the nodding and, and just leaning in is that you're intentionally being present in the meeting. And I think that is so important to just, close out the tabs, put aside, and we started doing this intentionally with our meetings at TomorrowZone, whether it's internally or hosting, just taking a minute at the beginning to just kind of bring everybody into this meeting and go, okay, let's take a deep breath. Let's finish whatever you're doing, close down tabs, because just being intentional about being present in that meeting is super important. And one of the things that I do to help myself with that, there's a lot of differing opinions on whether or not you keep your self view on or not. I know people that there was a lot of talk about Zoom fatigue, and that was one of the things that was playing into Zoom fatigue was just having to stare at yourself all the time because it's not a natural thing. I need to have my camera on because for me, it's accountability. It's, like, oh, did I make that face out loud? Kind of a thing. It's interesting because one of the things that I do is I lean in like this when I'm talking, when I'm interested in what someone's saying. But on camera, that can look like boredom. So it's things like that it's, for me, it's a natural response to do that. But I check it and I go, is that the look or is that the vibe that I want to be giving off? And so it's just kind of a continual check for me to make sure that the way that I'm actually showing up, the way that I'm intending to show up. So that's just one of the things that I do. And I also love the do not disturb. That is a huge thing for me.
Deb, how about you?
Well, I was going to say, I just wanted to point out, if you're watching this on video, Jennica actually does this really well. If you look at her right now and the way that she is framed, in the meeting, as she's talking, you can see her hands. And she's framed in a way that it actually builds trust. Just the way that she's showing up helps build trust and show engagement. And it brings energy because we tend to mirror each other when we're talking to each other in person. But I've also seen that happen in the virtual space. So I think that, really thinking about how you show up. And Alissa, you started earlier by talking about camera angles and such, that is part of showing up well. And, we'll often see people that are like standing off to the side, or, they're looking like this and they're not looking at the camera at all, the whole time. Now, we do that often because we'll have multiple screens set up. So I'm like, the faces are over there, the stuff we're working on is in front of us. And so, there's a little of that going on. But, I've had times where I've noticed too late in the game that, I have a moving desk and like my face is actually like this in the meeting, and all you can see is my nose and my eyes and my forehead. My forehead says hello. So, just take a look. But the other thing is, I love what Jennica was talking about with intentional presence. And one of our colleagues at our partners, the Human Leadership Institute, Jen Kronberger, always says, be where your feet are. But, when it comes to the virtual space, I'd say, be where your face is and know what's on your face. Mm-hmm. That's just a simple way to show up well in the virtual space. And then, the other thing, even if I'm not leading, showing up and being present, closing all the pings and dings and things and the distractions. And it's really hard, especially if you're running a company, you're pulled in all sorts of different directions. But, just come back to values. Why are you there, and why is your presence in that meeting important? And be there. The other thing that I do to show up well if I'm not leading is engage in the chat, engage in the conversation. If there's a breakout, engage the people in the breakout that you're talking with and actually participate. And there's a reason that you were invited.
Deb, I want to mention something that you mentioned, which was having multiple screens. And one of the things that you do so well that I learned from you is if you're going to be looking off at a different screen, you let people know what you're doing. You'll say your faces are over here and I'm drawn to faces. So if I'm looking over here, it's because I'm looking at faces. And I've started doing that where if I'm referencing something on a different screen, hey, I'm looking at the agenda, and it just lets people know that you're not checked out. You're still engaged in the meeting, and this is how you're engaging in the meeting. And so again, it's just that awareness and planning, but even just, we talk a lot about making the implicit explicit, just saying that out loud and letting people know how your setup is and what you're doing is super valuable, because then people know that you are paying attention, you are engaged, and this is how you're engaged.
That's a good one.
So there's different ways to be engaged, and we've all had those oops moments on camera. I'd love to hear a funny or awkward virtual moment you've experienced, and how do we build more grace and awareness into these spaces? And I will go first because I have one that may not be able to be topped. This was pretty early on in COVID, maybe a year or so into COVID. So Zoom was still pretty new. And a colleague and I were on the phone with a prospect, someone we were trying to sell our services to. And she was in a little office off of her bedroom. And in the background, her husband was walking around with very little clothing on. And me and my colleague were sitting there going, oh my God, does she know what's going on here? There's that person. And it was just so awkward and funny. And I don't know if she ever, to this day, she might not know. At one point, he got dressed and he came over and did give her a kiss on the head. So she knew that he was there. It was all very bizarre.
I feel validated in why I have my self-view on. Not that there's anybody behind me.
Yeah. So that was really interesting. And then, of course, I have a gaggle of children here in the house. And so they can sometimes provide for some awkward background noises. So managing that whole situation is another thing that you have to do in order to have effective virtual meetings.
You gotta be swift on your own mute button sometimes.
Yeah.
Indeed. Speaking of mute buttons, Jennica.
Yeah, the mute lady. She's
like her superpower. She's got a mute button and she is not afraid to use it.
I am not afraid to use it. Yeah, I have mute powers. But here's the thing is that when, so many of us are working from home, that just acknowledging our humanity. I mean, how many times we have to validate our humanity? We've got kids. I remember one time I was at a meeting and I looked over and my dog was throwing up. I was like, oh, that's awesome.
Lovely.
Just like life happens, right? And so again, just you have to laugh at it. And I think acknowledging it, because I remember I actually said that one time, like, oh, because who knew what my face was doing, right? Like, oh, this just happened. So, but I think for me, because, we've done a lot of virtual roundtables and different workshops like that. And I often am the one that is helping with production for that. And so a lot of it is just recognizing that, someone's mouth is moving and they don't have sound on. So it's, hey, Deb, I think your mute is on, or, it looks like you came off mute, Alissa, were you wanting to say some things? And it's a both and, right? Because if you're going to be intentional about muting yourself so you're not a distraction with background noises, sometimes we then are so excited about what we want to share, we forget to unmute. So again, just providing grace that we're all still, yes, I was joking before. I said I wanted to name this episode, "Oh, for the love of God, it's been 5 years." Yes. And yet there are still things that we're going to continue to trip over. So
yeah.
That's a good name for it. I have so many of those oops moments and I own them. We're all about learning forward here. And so, Jenica's been a really good partner in this because she helps me combat all of these oops moments with a really great checklist. So I actually have now a pre-show checklist that I use that reminds me to do even the most basic things, like look in the mirror, because I tend to turn my self-view off, and I've recorded whole shows without even my face being turned on in the meeting because I was so focused on who I was talking to. I've had instances where my voice just goes in the meeting because I forgot to bring water and be hydrated. So and we actually remind our clients, to show up to our workshop, be hydrated, be ready to participate, and give them a little instruction in that. But other things that very often, and we laugh about this at TomorrowZone, but we'll get so into what we're doing and collaborating, and I'll be talking about something, and then I'll hear, "Are you sharing in your mind again?" And yes. Let me share that to the screen as well. And so we don't get too upset about those things. They just happen along the way, and they've just kind of become a part of our culture. We have fun with it, just recognizing yes, I'm human. I am not a robot. Actually, funny story, just this week, for the first time, I was meeting with a large bank and they have very stringent security. I actually had to confirm my humanity to join their virtual meeting.
Wow.
First. I am not a robot. Then I was able to be led into the meeting. So, and that's, we're probably going to see more of that in this age of robots showing up at meetings. We use robots in our meetings. So expect there will be more of that. But, beyond just confirming to a computer your humanity, just recognizing hey, it's not a big deal if something happens. We're all human. We'll just move on and have fun with it. But I'm laughing at myself all the time, the dumb stuff I do. And
you have to laugh at yourself because you'd cry your eyes out if you didn't.
Oh my gosh. I find myself snort laughing at myself. So anyway, we're learning forward.
Yeah, we are. And speaking of learning, from screen setup to sound to virtual cues, what is one small thing that's made a big difference in how you're perceived or how you perceive others? Deb, we'll start with you.
So one thing that I've learned along the way, I think it's really, really important to be inclusive when you're facilitating. And whether you're doing that in person or you're doing that virtually, there's a reason why you have the people that you do in the room with you, whether it's physical or not. And so one of the things that I've found in 5 years of facilitating very engaging, hands-on, interactive virtual experiences with clients, with audiences, that you have to intentionally engage and include people in the conversation. And so one of the ways that I have found over the years to do that is to watch for what I call virtual body language cues. And so, like, when you're in person, you can kind of watch people are on the edge of their seat or they're like moving around or whatever. And you can kind of tell that they want to say something. And then you can bring them into the conversation when the time is right, or recognize them and say, okay, I see, I want to bring you into this conversation. Let's let so-and-so finish what they're saying. And then you can bring them in. I mean, it's just basic facilitation. But when you're in a virtual environment, it takes even more intention. And so watching for the mute button to come off, and watching the little square in your virtual meeting tool of choice light up when somebody comes off mute is one of the very tiny visual cues that we have found to just give a quick indication that this is somebody who wants to join in the conversation. And so then I will actually watch for that and bring them into the conversation in an appropriate way. But the other thing that I've done that kind of helps, especially if you've got a really engaged, excited group and people are really getting excited about the topic and they want to get into the conversation. When you're virtual, when people are talking over each other, it's really hard to hear. And so audio is so important in these environments. And so one of the things that I've found that really helps when I'm facilitating a conversation like that is to actually let people know, okay, I see, Jared and Mary and Mo are all interested in joining the conversation. We're going to start with Jared. Mary and Mo, you're on deck. And actually just giving very explicit cues. We're going to bring you in and include you, and there's an order to it. And then we don't have all of that crosstalk, talking over each other, and people are actually getting to have their say. And, we have found that there is actually a lot of freedom and creativity that comes from having just a little bit of structure like that. And people can show up and say their piece and really be a part of the conversation.
Yeah, well, providing the guardrails for interaction is really key to sparking innovation and creativity.
Absolutely.
So I'm curious, what are some things that you enjoy about virtual meetings? For example, I really love the gesture reactions. So I can put my hands in the shape of a little heart and then hearts come out of my hands and in the animation. I love doing stuff like that. So I don't know, not everyone's able to do it. I guess sometimes I have my magic hands, but I'm wondering what bubbles up for you guys in terms of things you enjoy about virtual meetings.
Jennica, why don't you go first?
Okay, I'll go first. Yeah. And you're right, Melissa, you do have the magic hands. I can never figure that out. But, it's interesting because I mean, we're a virtual team. Like, there are members of our team. We're all over the country. There are people that I have never met in person. Some I've only met once. Yet we are able to have such a strong culture of belonging and trust. And I have made such amazing relationships with people and connections with people virtually. And, I know that there's still this idea that you can't do that virtually. And I absolutely do not believe that because I've experienced the opposite. And when done right, when meetings are done intentionally, when they're done with respect, you can really develop some strong, powerful relationships. And I mean, I love that we can meet with people across the country, around the world. I mean, with some of the meetings that we've done, I mean, we have people in India. We have clients that have people in India. We've brought people in, as experts from Israel, from Great Britain. I mean, those are things that physical location is limiting. And I love just the world is literally available virtually, and we can connect amazingly virtually. And so for me, that is probably where I see the most power, is just relationships and amazing collaborations that we can do with this amazing tool. So that's what I love about it.
I'd love to go a little bit deeper on that with you, Jennica, because, I came from a world pre-2020 where the deep belief was that you can't be creative unless you're together in person, collaborating, and that you can't build deep relationships unless you're together in person. And, we've done a lot of these virtual events and virtual meetings, and through our client engagements and events, you have had the chance to meet people from all across the equipment finance industry for sure, and even outside. And so recently you just attended your very first ELFA event in person.
I did.
And I'm curious, what was that like for you after having, met so many people, but only virtually?
It was, first of all, it was so fun to meet people in person. I had to buy, actual pants and not sweatpants, but other than that, it was so fun. And we weren't starting from ground zero. I mean, we already had a relationship. So we weren't starting from the beginning. We were starting from mid-relationship. And so it was super fun. I mean, it was just fun to see people in person and actually give them a hug and, just height is hysterical because everybody's the same height virtually. But it wasn't, again, because we're so intentional about how we design our meetings at TomorrowZone, and we do develop trust and relationship. I wasn't picking up from the beginning. I was picking up from an established relationship. And so it just validated what we do and how we do it.
I guess, Alissa, one of the things that I really enjoy about virtual meetings is the opportunity to build deep, trusting relationships. I go to a lot of events and it's fun to get together in person. But at these networking events, you're just like, hey, how you doing? And then you're like a pinball inside of a pinball machine bouncing around, and you never actually get to have a real conversation with somebody unless you can get off to the side one-on-one and go a little bit deeper than small talk and the weather and a quick update. And I really love one-on-one, the Strengths Finder, one of my greatest strengths that has come out each of the 3 times I've taken it is relator. And that's about building those deep one-on-one relationships. And I have found that through this medium, I've really had some wonderful opportunities to get to know people one-on-one, carving out time, investing time one-on-one to get to know people. It's been one of the greatest blessings. I'm so grateful that we have this technology medium, even before COVID, where everyone was forced to interact that way. I had been making friends inside and outside of the industry just by making time to do that, and now when people are more inclined to actually get on camera and meet with you this way, it's just so much better. And I've been told before, by folks in the equipment finance space, oh, relationships are made in the bar. Well, maybe they are, but I don't drink. And so that's not where you're going to typically find me. And I believe that it is possible to meet people and build relationships, even in virtual spaces. My network has grown exponentially, even though my travel has decreased. And so, I think it's just my favorite thing that I enjoy is that I really do get to know people through this medium because I can meet them where they are, wherever they are.
I met my best friend 4 years ago doing a virtual meeting. And to this day,
cool.
We are best friends and see each other every week.
Well, I think the other thing too is, just even team culture at TomorrowZone. I mean, we're a digital first team, and we have been since I founded the company. We've been digital first, cloud first. I've met every member of the team in person, but that's not true for every other member of the team. I'm still, we have these connections and collaborations and culture that it just is so fun, and it's so enjoyable to work with each other, even though we, rarely or never see each other in person.
Going to the flip side of the human, we would be remiss to not talk about AI and its impact on the world.
Yeah, we got to talk about AI.
So I'm wondering, how is AI impacting and hopefully helping us when it comes to virtual meetings? I have a couple of examples. We use AI note takers at TomorrowZone. We've used several, and each is good for different things. And those are extremely helpful. Another thing that I used AI for that I was actually reminded of when you guys were talking about how you show up on a virtual meeting is that Jennica collaborated with ChatGPT to create this beautiful virtual background. And I was so inspired by her virtual background that I created one of my own, which we both have our backgrounds up right now. And that was done with AI. And, mine sort of mimics my own background with my rainbow books, but it's not quite as cluttered as my current background IRL. So those are really helpful things that AI has done for me personally in virtual meetings. And Jennica, I wonder what are you seeing in this realm?
I would say I also do love my virtual background because it's way better than what you would see if it wasn't up. But for me, it really is our AI note takers, because as the director of operation, my job would be to be doing minutes, and having an AI note taker in the room with us, the virtual room with us, allows me to show up as the human, be fully participating, and then be able to access that recording, the transcript, even, some of them now, you can interact with the AI within the note taker system. And so then I can still have what I need in order to do follow-ups, in order to make sure that everything's getting done in the business, but I don't have to be frantically taking notes and missing what's actually happening. And then I can bring who I am as a human and my gifts to that meeting without acting like a bot. And so that's, for me, has been a game changer with bringing that in.
The presence of the AI makes you a better human.
Yeah, it absolutely.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. I think there's a lot of myth out there that AI is about replacing humans. It's about replacing mundane, annoying work or leveling up or enhancing our humanity. There are a lot of cases where it can actually replace the task that a human needs to do. So, Jennica mentioned note taking, and we've been leveraging those types of AI tools and testing a whole bunch of different ones for a while. When I wrote the CLFP handbook, I actually leveraged AI for transcription, subject matter interviews to help me, very quickly find what I needed in my notes from those interviews. But it has evolved so much since then, to the point where now we can have bots actually attending meetings on our behalf. So, back to Jenica's point earlier, does this need to be a meeting? And a lot of times the answer is yes in business. But the other question is, do I personally need to attend this meeting? Or do I just need the outcome of this meeting? And so there are some meetings where I don't attend and my bot can attend on my behalf, and I can still catch the recording. If I want to go back to a certain place, I can ask questions of the meeting content after the fact. So when I think about how AI can impact virtual meeting experience, it's before, during, and after. So before the meeting, AI can help me in a collaborative way to actually design an excellent meeting experience that helps us get the outcome that we want. During the meeting, I don't know if you noticed this, but there has been quite an evolution in virtual meeting technology, and AI is behind the scenes helping to filter out some of those crazy, awkward sounds that are happening in the background. And so, that's just, a great way that AI is helping us that you may not have even noticed yet, but that's happening during your meetings. And then after the meetings, this is quite a shift in how you think about meeting and why you're meeting and the purpose of a meeting. But being able to interact with and ask questions of a meeting after the fact. I go back to our Fathom. Fathom is one of the AI tools that we use for note taking for meetings, but it's beyond just the notes. I can go back and I can reframe the notes into a sales type framework, or with my own prompts to say, what was this person most excited about? And then I can go right into that section of the meeting itself and review the conversation. And so you really can get way more value out of meetings today because of AI. And so coupled with that basic question, should this be a meeting? What's our purpose? When you bring AI to the table, you get even more powerful outcomes. So I think that, AI is not only helping us to show up and be more present with who we're meeting with, because we're not having to distract ourselves with trying to take notes and distill in the moment, but it's actually leveling up our work before, during, and after.
I agree completely. These are great examples, and it ties into the final question I have for you two. When it comes to virtual meetings, what's one thing people can do to shape a more awesome future?
I'm going to say focus on audio, because so much of what we get out of meetings, whatever's happening on video, if we don't have the audio, we're not actually able to connect with you and understand your ideas. Get the audio right. Get a set of cheap, earbuds if that's what you need to do. But, if the audio is good, the rest of the meeting is better.
I'm going to go visual.
That's surprising. She usually goes audio.
Well, I'm going to say take about 30 minutes and assess your setup. So I'm going to go full. Like, for example, if you have backlighting, you're going to show up like a ghost. And so, just looking at the positioning, do you have good lighting? Are you in a place where you can be, you should be centered in your screen. You can see we're all centered in our screen. It just, what does your background look like? And there's a lot of great virtual backgrounds if you can't set something up yourself. So just taking that time to make sure that, and you can turn on Zoom and you don't have to actually be in a meeting. You can start a meeting that's just you and look at, how am I showing up? Am I clear? Because if you're wanting to be connecting with people, the audio is super important, but them being able to see your face, see your reactions, then they feel like they know you and they're connecting with you. And so just it really doesn't take a long time, 30 minutes on after work or over lunch or on a Saturday, just to make sure that once you're set up, you're set up. So for me, that's what I would say.
I would say, embrace the technology. It's here. It's not going anywhere. It's here to stay. It's only going to get better. And, really use it to its fullest and to your own benefit. So there you have it, folks. It is within your power to make virtual meetings efficient and enjoyable. Experiment with one new strategy from today's conversation in your very next meeting. Thank you for tuning in. If you found this helpful, we would love for you to subscribe to the podcast, even share it with a colleague. Until next time, stay curious and choose to make awesome happen.